Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot.
And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Kathleen Carley. She is a professor of societal computing at the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. Kathleen, thanks for joining me today.
This is absolutely my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So, in fact, I did you a complete disservice, I know that, by only including one of many academic titles and areas of interest. For the benefit of the listeners, could you share a little bit of your background and how you arrived at this role and some of the sort of highlights of this illustrious career?
Okay. Well, I actually began my career as looking at political science and economics at MIT, got a PhD at Harvard in sociology, and it was only after coming to Carnegie Mellon and working here for a while that I eventually ended up in the computer science, the whole school of computer science. But all along, I've always been fascinated by trying to understand how who we know affects what we know and how what we know affects who we talk to. And so that's kind of what I've been looking at. Whether it was people talking face-to-face or through email, and now through social media.
So, in fact, the study of one of the effects that, has always been very clear to me, if you hang around happy people, you end up being happy, and if you hang around sad people, you end up being sad. Is that a sort of reasonable way of putting it?
That's absolutely right. It's what we call social influence.
And that social influence isn't just in person, as you clearly are sort of steered towards. This impacts you through all of the media that we consume.
Absolutely. And in fact, it doesn't even have to be people who are impacting you. You're actually impacted by people, other organizations, bots, because your brain, once it gets the information, can't remember who it got it from anyway. So it just treats it all the same.
Wow, that's really distressing for me because I've always thought I could remember where I got things. Sometimes I'm terrible at crediting folks, but that's bad news for my brain because I do try and give credit where credit's due. So the reason we ended up talking, I saw an article that was posted talking about the social media investigation and research that you've been carrying out. Tell us a little bit about what that is and what you've been doing.
So I and my group have been looking at social media and doing social media analytics basically since social media started. And we developed things like tools for identifying bots, which are these little robotic automated accounts, identifying trolls, which are people who are spreading havoc through the use of hate speech and identity bashing, and we developed tools for analyzing it, and we also then collect the data. So with COVID-19, we actually started collecting data back in January because it looked like this was going to be an important event, an event where there would be, some disinformation, but there would be a lot of different countries involved and so on, and it just exploded from there.
So as you looked at social media, so you say you started when social media, and I'm trying to cast my mind back far enough to sort of think when that was. When you think of that, are you talking, tell us what media channels you were looking at when you first started on this journey. What did that include? Are you going to say MySpace? Am I going to?
No. We actually looked at, we actually started with Foursquare, Twitter, and Facebook.
Interesting. So, and that was essentially starting to take the data in. I'm sure at that point it was maybe easier to do this. There was more sort of open access to the information, or is that not the case?
Oh, absolutely. You had way more access, and especially Facebook was way more open, and they weren't deleting accounts as near as frequently. And so if you have the data, you got it forever. And it's just gotten increasingly hard to study this realm.
Interesting. And, I imagine that Well, hopefully what you're doing is you're continuing to add to your sort of set of data resources. So you're continuing to pull this information on an ongoing basis.
That's correct. We are.
So well, you looked at COVID-19. I mean, the first thing that occurs to me is you nailed that in January. So you're clearly some kind of a seer who can see into the future, because you were getting this way ahead of many other folks in terms of, levels of interest. It was, sufficiently relevant. What did you start to see? What were your sort of investigations starting to show, and how quickly did you see that?
Well, by early February, we could see that we knew that initially the information was going global right away. So we were looking at state to state spread, country to country spreading of information, and a lot of it originally was, wow, look what's happening in China, right? And then it kind of started to drizzle out. But then as soon as there started being cases outside of China, it just escalated and went through the roof. And one of the things we saw early on was a variety of disinformation stories trying to about the nature of the virus itself, like that it only really impacted the elderly, or it only caused a brief lung disease, or it was very mild, or it was just another type of flu. So it was like that. Then there began to be lots and lots of different stories about different fake cures and fake prevention techniques. And also there began to be a lot of different conspiracy theories, like this was a bioweapon out of China. No, it was a bioweapon out of the U.S. And very quickly then, the dialogue began to get very politicized, meaning that different countries were sending out things in a way that sometimes spread disinformation, but did it in a way that was in tune with their national political agenda. And then we saw, of course, fake stories about what countries were doing in response to it, fake stories about various leaders, fake stories about reopening, and eventually fake stories about the protests.
So you talk about, first of all, well, maybe it shouldn't be shocking in this day and age, but it still is in many respects. On such an important topic, it's, had this worldwide effect. But there are some aspects to that. So first of all, you see this shift. How do you see those things within the data? What's helping you guide you to see, for instance, state actors and the messaging? What's the way that you sort of tease that out from the signals?
Very carefully. So we collect this huge amounts of data, and we segment it by day, and then each day we will do things like we run a whole set of tools we've been developing on it. We run our bot hunter technique on it. We run our troll hunter. We run our hate speech detector. We run our what country does it appear to be coming from detector. And so we do all that, and that gives us a bunch of attributes. Then in addition to that, we have a set of known user handles for various state-sponsored media, for various news agencies. And, we simply just then pull out all the tweets that they sent and all the retweets of those, and look at and then build this network of who's retweeting them, who's replying to them. And then we look at the hashtags about what is being said, and then we do a bunch of other data science things to it, like clustering and so on, to see how it changes.
So you mentioned some sort of key facts there, and I obviously jump straight at this and think, wow, you have a bot hunter. So tell us how that works. What's the sort of process to find bots? Because I know I've been duped in the past because I've ended up having exchanges, and it clearly degrades in a way. What's the process to go about that? Aside from coming to you and saying, Kathleen, tell me who all the bots are. Will you do that?
So I could try, but I don't know how good we'd be. So our bot tool, what it does is that to build one of these tools, it's a machine learning tool. We use an approach where we get bunches of data that have what's called training data, where it's been human marked as to whether or not it is a bot. And so we have that data to start with. and we have other data that we've marked as to that we know it's a human, and we build this algorithm that basically fits that data, okay? And then we use that algorithm to predict for other data whether or not those other actors are bots or not. And so when you get this thing built, think of it as like a glorified regression analysis, okay? Once you get it fixed, and then you apply it to other data, you test it on basically both its precision and its recall. Okay, think of it as type 1, type 2 errors. And then when you get that, you can say something is a bot with a certain level of, if you will, accurate, or a simple level of believability, okay? And most people, for most machine learning algorithms, will pick something like 50%. If they've got it bot or not, they'll pick like 50%. We actually chose to go, we can actually, as you change that level and go up higher and higher, you'll get higher precision but worse to recall. But you will get different numbers of things being declared bots. So part of this is you as a scientist or you as a person using the tool have to say what level you're willing to accept of inaccuracy. And then say, given that set, I'm going to tell you how many bots there are and who's the bot.
And so those confidence levels can be adjusted depending on your tolerance for inaccuracies. And then there was something else that you said there. I would have thought this was a trivial exercise, but clearly it's not, to tell where the account or the person is, because I know I'm broadcasting the fact that I'm in this location, assuming it's turned on. But it sounds, I mean, I think you said country hunter in the same sort of principle.
Yeah.
What's the challenge there?
Yeah, so it's very, very difficult. So less than 30% of all tweets have any kind of geospatial information in them, right? So we actually try to infer it by using such things as the language, particular turn of phrases in the language, mentions of particular cities, where they've been seen in the past, who they're most likely to retweet or reply to, time of day, and so on. Knowing that people form these little triads, and those are often all near the same location. But when we go to use that in the bot tools take into account such things as characteristics of what is being said in the tweet, like is it just a random string or is it actual words? How many times does it mention someone? Is it exactly like what another tweet from another actor is? Because exact matches are rare unless they're by bots. Is there a gender mismatch between the profile image of the tweeter and the name that's used? What does the name look like? Is it just a string of numbers? So we use characteristics or attributes of both the tweeter and of the tweet itself, as well as things like the inter-arrival rate, the frequency of which they tweet.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some of those graphs. It's kind of interesting. As soon as you analyze, and I can only do it at a single account level with, the tools that I have, you can see really clearly when there's this very consistent sort of play of content. Although actually, if you look at my account, you probably see strings at certain times, but there are other aspects. But that gender thing's really intriguing. But anyway, for those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Kathleen Carley. She is Professor of Societal Computing at the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon. We were just talking about Twitter and hunting down those bots and trying to understand how all of that I'm going to call it fake information. Maybe it's not, but in some respects, propaganda. And I know that's almost a pejorative term, but it's actually a descriptive term in my mind. And you were cited in an article that I read where you talked about the sort of frequency or the amount of this. Tell us a little bit about how you reached that number and what that means and what it is.
We found at one point that in one particular part of the COVID data, there seemed to be close to 45% bots.
Wow.
And that's at a 65% level. If we go up to a 75% level, there'd be maybe 25% bots. So that number is based on our view of what level of precision recall is necessary,
right,
as well as having trained and retrained our model for COVID data specifically.
So, that's just it's a mind-blowing number when you think about it, and it sort of causes this enormous consternation in my own mind as to how you derive or sort of tease out. And we've seen actual damage, physical damage, I'm sure in other instances, but let's just talk about COVID-19 for now. And I've seen the pictures, assuming the pictures were from bots, but the 5G towers that have been, I don't know that they were burnt down, but there was an attempt to burn them down based on this conspiracy theory that 5G is causing the virus.
That's right.
So there are real effects in this. How do we deal with this? How does our future cope with this reality that we're now living in?
I think we have a lot of soul searching as the world to come up with some good solutions and what we want and what we're willing to afford, ethically and so on, and legally. But I will say that when you look at like the 5G tower thing and so on, you can't blame that on bots and just say, well, if we got rid of all bots, that would never happen.
Right.
Because in fact, humans make up the original stories, and a lot of times what we'll see happening is that maybe the bots are used to amplify some stories. Then the humans take it from there and spread it even further and move it over to Facebook and over to, Instagram and to all these other places. So it's a kind of shared kind of ecosystem there. And the other thing is bots are also busy spending their time doing things like retweeting the World Health Organization, warning people that tsunamis are coming. So they're just a tool, right? So the disinformation itself, and you're asking like, well, how do we deal with it? I think that we have to begin to first get better at recognizing when information is, not just disinformation, but it's disinformation in a way that is harmful, that could cause harm. And it's important for people to call it out, to not respread it, and, for us to think about what policies as countries were willing to put in place to stop the spread, if any.
I agree with you, but the challenge I have, and I'll use a specific example in healthcare, where we had a concept for stomach ulcers that were caused by acid. That was essentially the sort of prevailing wisdom. And a couple of scientists came up with the premise that actually that wasn't the case. It was caused by bacteria, and they were literally laughed out of society meetings. They presented their data. In fact, ultimately proven with terrible. It was terrible for the individual to actually do it, and thankfully he recovered. But he essentially drank a flask of the bacteria, showed that he got ulcers, and then was able to cure it by taking antibiotics to treat those particular bacteria. But if we just reject, so taking your notion of, recognizing harm and calling it out, how do we identify, getting to that point? So part of me thinks that there has to be some level of technology. In the same way you talk about technology being good and bad, can your technology help or the concepts help in terms of identifying it so that we can apply a human touch to this, so that we can be more cautious? Is there some mix of this that allows us to get to a better position?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think some of the most effective things we can do is warn people that your discussion you're having here appears that there's these 5 actors appear to be trying to influence you and make you think this. And you can give warnings to people like that, and then they can choose whether they want to whether they agree with it, want to throw it out, whatever. This is definitely as we like to say, a human in the loop solution is needed in this case.
So, thinking forward as we sort of, come to the close, I know you have, there's an organization, I think Netonomics is the name of it. It takes some of this. Tell us a little bit about that and how people can access the tools and the resources, because obviously, not obviously, but I'm sure many people listening in listen to this and go, gosh, I want to be part of the solution and not be misled. What are you doing and how are you sort of approaching this? Not just in COVID-19, but obviously in the broad aspect of this.
Yeah, so we've actually taken some of these ideas and turned them into several different technologies that are designed for helping you analyze data that lets you then detect things like bots and disinformation and so on. And one of these is a machine learning tool for natural language processing that detects things like hate speech and things like that. Another one is a network, what's called a network analysis tool. And the company Netonomics actually builds these, sells these, extends them, and does consulting with them for various people. Another way I would say to help is that also we have a social cybersecurity working group with a webpage we maintain. And there's actually thousands of people trying to work in this area. And you can just join part of the conversation, go to the webpage for information, tell us if you know a solution, we'll post it for you.
Fantastic. So lots of potential. It feels like, we have to empower the good as part of this. I mean, and I agree with you. I can think of one bot that I actually know of that takes the hash. I mean, it's a very simple one. It just, anytime somebody tweets COVID for MDs, it just retweets it. It's nothing more than that.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand not everything is bad. Technology applied can be good and bad. I think the important thing to learn from this is that there's tools and capabilities, and we have to understand that to be able to apply it in our own perspective. And one of the ways of doing that is that consorting that you talk about, accessing your research. We'll put some links in with the show. Any thoughts about the coming months and where this is all going to finish?
I think that over the coming months, what we're starting to see is more uses of trolls to actually build groups that are like hate groups around certain subtopics aimed at creating problems, particularly as they'll link out to the elections and link to different minorities. There's also a growing amount of disinformation that's being spread that is linking COVID-19 to vaccination. And there's stories going out there such as if a vaccine comes out, do not take it because it will contain a 5G chip that will get into you and which will allow the government to control you through 5G. So that's crazy. And then there's increasing number of stories by foreign state actors that are anti-U.S. that are coming out, and those will really impact and are beginning to impact and will impact much more our relationships with our neighbors to the south in particular.
Wow. For those of you that can't visually see me, as of course you can't on the radio, I'm here shaking my head with just sheer aghast at even some of those stories and activities. Wow, this is challenging times. I'm so glad there are folks like yourself and the research that you're doing to be able to expose this. I would leave listeners with the thought that treat all information with suspicion at least, and at least some level of questioning of the source and where that comes from. We've run out of time. Just remains for me to thank you, Kathleen, for joining me. It's been a fantastic conversation and really insightful.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at Dr. Nick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.